almost there. We've almost finished. You guys done a lot of great work this semester, and I'm really proud of all the work you've generated. I hope you've grown during the course. I would like to provide this lecture as kind of a way for you to find a home for some of the stuff that you perhaps may have done in this course or in the future. Okay, so this is my lecture on publishing and how to publish. I focus primarily on small presses, and I don't focus a lot on the big players, you know, like Penguin or Random House. Okay, but this is where most people would publish their work for poetry and creative nonfiction and fiction. Okay, so you should have a pen, paper ready, should be used to this by now. A little activity. I would like you to do a little free write and answer the following questions. What is your quote unquote style as a writer of poetry or fiction or nonfiction? Imagine somebody came up to you and said, "Oh, what style do you write in?" Right? It's somewhat hard to define, but it's helpful to have some terms or helpful to have a description for later in this lecture when I teach you how to search for magazines that will perhaps publish your work. So again, just do your best on, how would you describe your style as a writer? Next, describe your voice or style to readers. Under what category would your work appear in a bookstore or library? What kinds of themes do you like to explore the most? What is the title of your first book of poetry, short story collection, or novel? Now, you may not know what that is yet because you don't have one, or maybe you do, I'm not sure, and maybe there's a working title, but it's nice to start thinking of like, well, what kind of title would I have if I were to have a book? And who do you read? What writers have inspired you? And this might be the most important question of all. If you meet another writer and they ask you, or you're having a conversation and, it gets to the topic of the kinds of stuff that you write, one of the most common questions you're going to get as a writer is not, what do you write? It's going to be, who do you read? Because who you read will show that other person or describe to that other person the kind of stuff that you write more than your description of your own writing, believe it or not. Okay, so read widely and read a lot, and make sure you have like your favorite writers ready to sound off to somebody in case you find yourself in a poetry reading and there's another writer there that you admire and they want to have a conversation with you and they ask that question. Okay, so publishing or getting your work out there, it's an interesting field, or it's an interesting phenomenon, but there's so many ways to do it, and yet it seems hidden, kind of like Hogwarts platform 9 3/4, right? Like it's there, but it's for some reason it's hard to find, but it's so big. How could you hide it? Right? That's an experience a lot of early writers. They just don't see that community, but it is there. You just have to find it. And I'm going to try to help you find that community. Okay, so there are types of publications, okay, different types. There are literary magazines and journals. They exist online and in print. Some of those literary magazines are independent publishing literary journals, i.e. someone is paying maybe with grants or with their own money or by, attaching, a publishing house to it, a press of their own. They're run by their, it's an individual effort or a group effort, and it's being independently funded. Other literary journals come from universities or colleges themselves. For example, if you transfer to a college and you major in creative writing, or you go to get your MFA in fiction or creative nonfiction or poetry, you essentially major in creative writing at a college, and that college has a literary magazine, there will probably be a class that you can take where you get to be part of the literary magazine editor board. Okay, you get to be an editor, you get to go through submissions, you get to decide what gets in, you get to help with figure out what the cover art's going to be, all of those things. Okay, so the people who run those journals are the students themselves. Okay, for example, when I was going to San Francisco State, they have 2 literary journals. They have one for the undergrads and one for the graduate students. The one for the undergrads is called Transfer, and the one for the graduate students is called 14 Hills. Transfer publishes people on campus, right? But 14 Hills is international, okay? And you can publish, it's public, right? But the people who are, the editors are students, and it's a revolving set of editors, okay? You can also publish in anthologies. An anthology is a collection of work focused on a specific theme, like, anthology of, writing during times of COVID, right? There might be an anthology of COVID poems or COVID fiction, or, women of color. Anthologies have lots of different themes and lots of different topics, and it's a variety of writers. It's not just one writer through the whole book, and they get submissions very similarly to how you would get submissions for a literary magazine or a journal. You can publish full-length manuscripts through a small press. You can even publish chapbooks, and I'll explain what chapbooks are, but they're mostly for poets. You can publish books through a university or college press. So let's talk real quick about the difference between a press and a journal. A journal usually has issues, right? Like there's 1 to 2 issues a year, or they come out every quarter, right? It just depends on how often they want to. Sometimes some journals only come out once a year. Okay. And the work, there's variety of people in it. And there's editors deciding, there's all these submissions, and they have to go through the submissions and decide what gets in them. A university press or a college press or even a small press, that is like a publishing house. What they do is you submit work, and if they decide they want to publish you, right, it will be a small run. Maybe it depends on, some are bigger than others, but maybe an average might be 500 issues. They'll publish your poetry book. It'll be 500 books, and then they have their own way of marketing them, and then you also have to do some marketing too. These are small presses, right? Some of them, just like magazines, are independently supported. Somebody created the press, and they publish people. Sometimes they publish once a year. Sometimes they publish continuously. Anyone could have a small press if you have enough money to invest in a writer, right, to publish and then market that stuff. Sometimes journals are attached to small presses. Okay, for example, there's university presses. If you look inside maybe your favorite book, if it's not from a really big publisher, you'll see that the press, maybe you've never heard of them because they're not super big, but universities publish books, right, that are usually attached to the literary magazines that they run. Other ways to publish are through contests, grants, and awards. And I'm going to go over that in a later slide as well. But one way to get published is to win a contest, and you would submit to that contest very in a similar way as to submitting to a magazine, a journal, and perhaps even a manuscript. There's also a couple of warnings here. If you go to this link, it does say Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. I am a fan of science fiction, but they just have a really good website. And in this website, they have this great list of things to watch out for publishing. You don't want to necessarily send your work everywhere. Not all presses are good. Not all literary journals are good. And so I ask that perhaps you read through this list of things to watch out through. There's quite a few. All right. But it's not this scary maybe as you think. I'll explain to you how it's done. And, after you figure out how publishing works or how you can publish in these small magazines, there'll be enough criteria for you to figure out, what a red flag might be and what it might not be. But if you want to know more, please go to this link and it'll help you. A lot of them are done online now. So if you submit your work online to an online magazine, okay, a lot of them use Submittable. Submittable is just some software online that organizes work for these literary magazines. You submit to Submittable, and then the literary magazine that you're trying to submit to will gain access to it. It's really helpful. It tells you when things have been submitted. It tells you when things have been read. It'll tell you when things have been rejected or accepted. I believe it's free. If you're making your own small press or your journal, it's not free because you're using them, but it is free for you to use. Okay, so I suggest perhaps making an account with Submittable. Okay, so there's various places that you can publish, and there's various places that you can get resources on how to publish and where to publish. One organization that should be on your radar if you are interested in getting a degree in creative writing or furthering your career as a writer is the Association of Writers and Writing Programs, the AWP. This is really, really big. This happens every year. It is a gigantic conference, and they focus on writing and writers and different writing programs. Okay, you don't necessarily have to be part of an MFA program or be a creative writing major, but they do focus a lot of their resources around that. Okay, so this is a link. You could just press this picture here and it'll take you right to the AWP website. Their conference appears somewhere different every single year. They may have, oh, look, the proposals are open. I wonder where they're going to go this next year. But I went a couple of years ago to San Antonio. It was really fun. So if you go to their website, you'll see community and calendar, contests, careers. So all of these things that can help you as a writer and maybe get a job as a writer or to publish. Okay. So this is a very good website. It's a really great conference, although it can get kind of expensive because you have to go there. One, you have to pay the fee to get in, and then you actually have to go to wherever they are. Maybe they're going to be maybe it looks like they're going to San Francisco this year. That would be a big one. I would suggest going if it's San Francisco because it'll be close. But again, like last year or 2 years ago, I went to San Antonio. The fee is rather high to go. I believe it's like $400 or something for registration fee. However, and you can do what I did because I did this, you can volunteer. Okay, so you can volunteer to help people register for the conference, and they'll waive your fee for you. And it's only like 4 hours of work. It's really easy. You meet some cool people, and it's like $100 an hour, man. It's a pretty good salary. So if you want to volunteer, you can you go through the website. You just fill out their information. It's very easy, and you can volunteer, and they'll waive your registration fee. Another really good resource is Poets and Writers Magazine. They have a print magazine. You may have seen them. Maybe if you go to Barnes & Noble, you'll see a Poets and Writers Magazine. But they have a lot of really good resources as well. Okay, and one of those resources is finding literary magazines. So there are different places you can go, different websites and search engines to help you find the correct or right journal for you. This is one. It is free. It's pretty big, but they mostly focus on really big. Well, I don't know about really big, but they tend to focus on journals that have been around for a while. They're, definitely not they're not necessarily done by private individuals who just started their literary magazine within a year, right? So one benefit to using the search engine through Poets and Writers is that the magazine is probably, it's safe. It's a real magazine. It's not super tiny that no one would know it existed, right? And it's definitely probably not a scam. Okay, so as you can see here, there is these criteria for you to look for the kind of magazine you want to submit to. Every magazine has its own theme. They have their own editorial board, and they have, their own mission statement of the kind of work they're looking for. Every magazine has its own thing, right? Think of it as kind of like a club. Every club has its own membership and every club has its own theme, and people only join those clubs if it's something that they're interested in, right? Like a chess club. You wouldn't be a baseball player and join the chess club and expect them to play baseball, right? So you wouldn't submit a creative nonfiction piece to a magazine that doesn't publish creative nonfiction. You wouldn't submit a piece of fiction to a magazine that only publishes people who live in, Alaska, which I'm sure that exists, right? Because you're living in California, probably. You wouldn't want to submit your poems about the zombie apocalypse if the journal doesn't publish genre poetry or genre fiction, right? So you have to do a little research on the magazine to see what they're interested in. So just to take you through how a magazine does this, or how you can figure out whether the magazine is a good match for you, I'm just clicking on the first one here. It's called Two River. They've been around since 1996. That's good to know. That means they've been around a while. They're not going to just disappear. They publish chapbooks, it looks like. Here they have, this looks like mostly poetry. Okay. If you go to Masthead, you'll see their about page, right? It says, since 1996, Two River has been a site of poetry, art, and theory quarterly, so 4 times a year, publishing the Two River Review and occasionally publishing individual authors in the Two River Chapbook series. And more recently, podcasting poems and commentary from Muddy Bank, the Two River blog. All publications first appear online and afterwards in print. Before submitting to Two River, please read the guidelines. Okay. Then there's memberships you can be a part of. And down here, all right, so editor and publisher. Richard Long is a professor of English at St. Louis Community College, Merrimack, where he teaches creative nonfiction, creative writing, poetry, and plays, and technical writing. Okay, so this magazine is it's getting its funding from a community college in St. Louis. All right. The main editor and publisher is Richard Long. He's a professor and he teaches their creative writing, right? He's the person that he probably, gets his students to help go through the submissions, right? And so this would be a very good, since maybe a lot of you are starting out and you yourselves are in community college, this is actually maybe a really good magazine for you to submit to, okay? Okay. So that's just the first one that popped up on Poets and Writers. But there's so many. There's hundreds and thousands of these magazines. How do you find the ones that are for you? Well, here's a handy little tool that Poets and Writers have created. So just go ahead and you go through and you find what fits, your genre as a writer. I'm just going to pick creative nonfiction because I'm writing a lot of that right now. And then there's subgenres of creative nonfiction. There's BIPOC voices, commercial fiction, erotica, experimental, feminist, fiction, creative nonfiction. I guess they do the same ones for all of them. Literary, micro poetry, poetry, pop culture. I'm going to do pop culture. Simultaneous submissions means that you can submit to multiple magazines at once, the same piece to multiple magazines at once. If they do not accept simultaneous submissions and you submit the same piece to them and to other places and they find out, you get kind of red flagged, right? Like usually if they don't accept simultaneous submissions, it's a really fancy magazine, okay? So in the beginning, you probably don't want to submit to places that don't take simultaneous submissions because we only have so much work to publish, right? You want to give it the best chance it can have by submitting it to many places at once. But just be careful, because if, a place that doesn't accept simultaneous submissions accepts your piece and you send it to other places, right? And they find out that's not good. So I'm going to say accept simultaneous, 25 per page, sure. And I'm going to reset. Oh, whoops. Creative nonfiction, pop culture, Simultaneous. Filter, that's the word. Okay, what do we got? 34 Mag, All the Sins, interesting. Another Chicago magazine, the Bangalore Review, Big Muddy Journal of the Mississippi River Valley, BlazeVox, I've heard of BlazeVox, Booth, Broad Street, Chill Filter Review, Cobalt Review. Note how they're all alphabetical. Okay. This one looks fun. Ekphrastic writing. All of the poetry and prose we publish is inspired by visual art. I think that's really cool. I'm going to go ahead and click on that just to show you. So you go and they've got all the statistics based on the magazine. Do they accept electronic submissions? Yes. Simultaneous submissions? Yes. Unsolicited, that's another term to know. Unsolicited means they did not ask you for your work. You are just submitting it. Some magazines are so fancy that they only publish people they ask to publish in their book. They can email anyone, a famous writer, and be like, hey, we want to publish your poems. And if they agree, they agree. But they're so fancy that they only publish people that they've reached out to. So we don't want to go there. Number of debut authors per issue. This is important in the beginning, right? Because it's hard to get your foot in the door. So it's good to go through magazines at first that will go out of their way to publish debut authors. And it says, we publish many first-time or emerging poets. Okay? Note how it says payment, no payment. You should not be paying anybody to submit anything unless it is a contest. Okay? Do not give anybody any money to submit to a magazine unless it's a contest. All right. It says editorial focus is ekphrastic writing, and all poetry and prose we publish is inspired by visual art. So if your work is inspired by visual art, this might be a good magazine for you. Here are some tips from the editor. Read the journal. We love diverse styles of quality writing from all over the world, but if your work doesn't respond to works of visual art, we can't use it. If you are someone who loves visual art and loves writing about visual art, we'd love to hear from you. Okay? So that might be you. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. But see, you go through and you just find a magazine that you like. Maybe you like the cover. I don't know. I'm going to go to W all the way to the end. Whale Road Review. I like that one. Wilderness House Literary Review. Some of these are fun. Wizards in Space. Oh, man, that's fun. So Wizards in Space. Let's see. Number of debut authors, 13. Pretty good. They pay. Pretty good. Not bad. Most of them do not pay. We're particularly interested in themes of space and place, things that change and things that don't, the spots we share and the ones we keep to ourselves. Where do you go when you need peace? Where do you go when you need to be loud? Etc., etc. Okay? So one tip that you'll get over and over again, and they mean it, it is very important, is that you should read the magazine that you're going to submit to. Because if your writing style does not match the style that they're looking for, they're not going to publish you. Okay? And it kind of looks bad. It's like, well, did this person read our magazine? Because clearly, if it's clear that you didn't read their magazine because of the work you're submitting doesn't match what they're publishing, that also could start raising red flags. And if you submit to enough places, I mean, these literary magazines do talk to each other after a while, right? So just, make sure that you read the magazine and make it clear that you've read it to the publishers, that they'll see that, the stuff that they're publishing is reflected in what you're asking them to publish of your own work. Okay, here's another very good resource called Duotrope. It does cost money, but you can get a free trial. I believe it's a week or a month. I'm not sure what they're doing right now. It's a really, really good resource, but it's a little more open than Poets and Writers, okay? Not anyone can go to Poets and Writers and get their magazine listed on their search engine. Same with AWP. With Duotrope, most people, I believe, can just go on there and submit their own literary magazine saying that it's ready for submissions, whether they're a good magazine or not. Okay, so it's very big, right? If you start a literary magazine, you'd want to probably register with these people so that people can find you. But you might need to do a little bit more, like be a little more scrutinizing of the kind of results that you get. But I do encourage you to use Duotrope. I did when I was publishing poetry. I was definitely using Duotrope. I pay them $5 a month for their service. It's pretty cheap. I mostly continue to pay them even though I don't use them that often, just because I want to support them because they help me find magazines. Very much like Poets and Writers, you look for the magazines in a very similar way. There's these criteria here. List by category. I'm just going to say fiction. Any type. You can do anthologies, book publishers, imprints, and press series, contests, journal magazines, and literary agents. We're going to go to literary magazines, title, or pay categories. We're not going to go to pay. Most times you don't get paid for your work. Your payment is publication and usually a copy of the book, if there is a physical copy. Okay, so here is a random list that they have. And this one, let's look at the very, very beginning. It says, All Accounts and Mixture, Cut Bank Online, was a magazine, okay? And I say was because it says it's temporarily closed, probably because of COVID, okay? So if it says temporarily closed, don't submit to them. Apricity Press, Banshee Press, these are all closed. Note, one of the symbols here is money. It means that they might charge fees for your submission. I do not suggest submitting to any place where they're asking for a fee. Okay. Brasilia Review. Notice how it doesn't say it's temporarily closed and it doesn't have this symbol here. So I'm going to go ahead and just press on Brasilia Review. And over here is the cover image of the magazine. It looks pretty sparse. I would usually publish in a place that has some better art, right? Sometimes you know that's what draws people in, is the art that they pick. But it was established in 2013. The Brasilia Review was founded in Brasilia, Brazil in 2013. We published there, moving to the Bay Area, California. We love Portuguese, but this is an English language review. We seek writers from all over the world. And then we go down here, and an electronic publication, so it is not a print magazine. Unknown publication frequency. It's unclear how many times they publish a year. The genre, it's a general genre, open to all or most genres. So you could be a poet, fiction, creative nonfiction, open to almost all styles. It says literary. Maybe it doesn't push the envelope, or it doesn't do too much experimental stuff, and definitely no genre fiction. And down here, it says types and lengths. They'll ask for flash fiction, which is up to 1,000 words, or short story, 1,000 to 3,000 words. Okay, there's no payment, but that makes sense. They usually wouldn't pay you. It's electronic. You don't submit through post. You can submit, simultaneous submissions. Okay. Literary mainstream. Oh, open to almost all topics, including anthropology and science. That might be, a good thing to know. Maybe if you have a poem about evolution or something. They'll even publish essays. Okay, this is their nonfiction, and there's their poetry. Okay, so that's Brasilia Review. Now you have to go to their website. It is it is not very big, or at least it's very sparse. I'm not going to use this one just because it's not necessarily a good general example of what magazines usually look like. I don't know. Skeleton Beetle looks fun. Here we go. Here's some art. Okay. This is international. They publish all over the world. They're almost open to almost all them. Skeleton Beetle is an independent submission-based online literary press founded and operated in Pelham, Ontario, and Burlington, New Jersey. Okay. All right. I'm going to the publisher's trying to go to the publisher's website. Okay. So it looks like they're brand new. It says #1. That's another thing to look for. You could, your chances of getting published in a magazine that is very new increases because they're still trying to get their footing, and they'll take a lot of people. But maybe wait until they've got a few issues under their belt. Okay. How about Hitchlit review? Let's see. Ooh, that one looks promising. This is right off their about page. So the great thing about Duotrope is they'll just give you the whole about for, and you don't have to go to their website to figure out whether or not this is the fit for you. But here it says the Hitchlit Review is a literary arts journal that seeks to showcase and celebrate openly secular artists, their works, and their communities. Found 2017, Hitchlit derives its name from two sources. First, the Oxford English Dictionary defines hitch as a verb, meaning to move something into a different position with a jerk. For many secularists, this is a fitting description for how they parted ways with former ideologies. So this looks like a Christian journal, so that may not fit a lot of people. Let's try Raven Cage. Ooh, that one looks cool. It's based out of Germany. And it looks like they do fantasy, horror, romance, and science fiction. That's fun. Let's see. Theme of Absence, Raven Cage, New Pop Lit. Oh, that one looks fun. Our goal is nothing less than to upend today's literary scene, to make American literature attention-grabbing. We seek to do this now with activism, but art. With fiction and poetry that's innovative, striking, and real. The world deserves better poems and stories. Okay, so they like generally just very good stories. They get short stories, poetry, and nonfiction. And so if we go to their website, there we go. Okay. So you can go to their features and stories, and you can read who's written. Okay, what this kind of stuff that they've written, and you can see if it's a fit for you. Does your work sound like their work? Okay. Okay, let's check out Visitant. It's a visitor from another realm. A visitant is a specter or a transitory creature. If I go to the publication's website, neat. Interesting. And here are some poems that they have published, and you can read them here. Pretty cool. Okay. If you go up here, submission guidelines. Okay, so this is the next thing I want to talk about. You have to follow submission guidelines to the T, or they will throw your submission out, especially if they get a lot. Okay, so don't give them a reason to throw out your submission. But each magazine kind of has their own submission guidelines. Okay, so right now they are accepting submissions of poetry, flash fiction, serialized fiction, and nonfiction essays. Submissions should be limited to 1,500 words, and they mean it. No more than 1,500 words. If you're interested in submitting a longer piece, we may still be able to publish it in a serialized format. But then you have to go here to see how long you're allowed to do it and what genre they're looking for. Please send all submissions to VisitantLit, and this is the @ symbol. This is so bots don't mess with their Gmail account. Attach your submission as a Word document. If it's PDF, they'll throw it out. Right? If it's Google Doc, they'll throw it out. Submission as a Word document, and include a short biographical statement in the body of your email in the third person, i.e., Renee Nelson, is a poet in the Bay Area, and she publishes blah, 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 right? So you're talking about yourself in the third person. Okay, there you go. So this one wants you to email them. Some of them will ask you to use Submittable. Either one. You just follow their guidelines. Okay. So that is how you would look for magazines. You could go, again, to Poets and Writers. You can go to the AAWP. You can go to Duotrope. Problem with AAWP is you might have to be a member. So that costs money to be a member. You do get a student discount, but it still costs money. So if you want to do for free, go through Poets and Writers. If you're okay with maybe $5 a month, or just, doing a 7-day free trial, right? Go to Duotrope. Okay. You can also submit to contests and anthologies, and you can look them up again in the same way here with Poets and Writers. You just, select contests, And, they'll pop up for, all these contests to get people to submit. Contests do cost money because you get money if you win. So in the few ways you can make money with your writing. I did win a poetry contest. It was through the University of California. And I got money, but I had to pay them a little bit of money. So I had to pay them like, I don't know what it was back then, maybe 10, 15 bucks. Then I got money for winning, third place, I think, or no, second place. It was second place. Right. But normally you don't get money, but in a contest you do, which is really, really cool. And, that's one way to get your name out there, because not only do you get published, but you get kind of featured, right? If you win their contest, you get money, you get featured, and you can put that in your cover letter. Okay, and I'll talk about, I guess I don't have that in the next slide, but, in your cover letter, you can say, hey, I've won this award, right? If you won this blank award, that'll make, your submission stand out from other submissions. Other ways to publish, poetry readings. Okay. That is not really publishing in print, but you are publishing in the sense that you're sharing your work with other people verbally, right? So you're performing your work. So I actually had a open mic. I got so busy this semester. I ended up letting somebody else take over for a little while, but it's called Time to Arrive Open Mic, and it's on Zoom. It's at Tuesday nights from 6 to 8. The link is on our website. Since you do have to, by the end of the semester, on finals day, submit a short 2-page report of, doing something in the community of creative writing, this would count, going to a poetry reading. Okay. So you can go to the poetry reading and you don't even have to read your work. You could just write about your experience going to a poetry reading. And you can read fiction, you can read creative nonfiction, and they're probably open to almost any genre. Here is also a very good resource. This is California Writers Club Peninsula branch, California Writers Club, all over California, and they host their own poetry readings, and they have all sorts of stuff. They have classes, they have workshops, they have all sorts of stuff. They're really, really good resource. Again, they cost a little bit of money, but those guys are really legit, and they're really good. So I do suggest them. Okay, so try it for yourself. Go to Poets and Writers or Duotrope or some of the resources listed on these slides and look for a magazine you think would be a good fit for you. And it might take a little while, right? It takes a while to find a magazine that you think would publish you, that your style matches with, right? It takes a little bit of research. You have to read some of their work, right? Peruse and find a magazine that fits your style. Visit the magazine and find a poem or story that fits your style, and you look up one of your favorite contemporary authors. What magazines have they published in? Go to their magazine's website and find work that fits your style. Okay, so I have done that. There's writers I admire, and I'm like, oh, where have they published? And you can look it up and submit your work to the same magazines that they did, because your work might sound similar because they're, influencing you. Look for open submissions, find magazines that spark your interest, and make sure to review the About page so that, you get a heads up, whether or not your work is a good fit for them. Okay, they're almost always going to ask for a cover letter. All right. You should automatically include a cover letter in the email. So if you have to submit an email to them, submission like one of the ones we just read where they had their email listed out and spelled out to avoid bots, right? In your email, it should take the form of a cover letter, and it doesn't have to be very long, but it's just one of those things that shows that you're serious, that you understand how this game is played. So here is an example of my old cover. This thing's like 10 years old, but it still works, right? So there's a very simple cover letter. Note how it is based on print back then. A lot of stuff was printed, right? So I would print this out and put it in my submission and mail it to the magazine. Now what I do is I cut out this top part, right? I still might keep this if it's relevant. Whoops. I still might keep it if it's relevant, right? Usually the heading, though, will mostly include just the name of their editor. So you have to go to the masthead to look who the editor is. and the title of the magazine. And then I say, Dear Mr., Miss. That might have changed now because we're more inclusive with different pronouns. So they, and the last name of the editor. If you're submitting poetry, look up the poetry editor. If you're looking up, if you're submitting for fiction, look up the fiction editor. And then here is a very general, attached or enclosed. It depended on whether or not I would put it in an envelope or if I was emailing it, are the number of poems are all going to allow me to submit, or that I am going to submit, to be considered for the name of the magazine. Poetry titles go in quotes. Okay. And then I have a listing of where I have published before. My poems appeared in Transfer, in which I received an award, Ziziva, Gonlan, right? So here's a variety of magazines. These aren't all of them. I just put the ones that might, like these are the bigger ones I've done, right? And then where I live in Santa Clara. I don't teach at Deanne's anymore, but I used to. And then I do have an MFA in poetry. And then sincerely, there's other tricks you can use to get their attention. All right, you can say, oh, I really love the issue this week. It's really awesome. And I love Blank's poem. I feel like mine is very similar, or I've been following this magazine for a while. And maybe, try to show them that you have read their work, that you're actually reading their magazine. And that might grab their attention. You can explain how your work is similar or how your work is a good fit. If you're good at explaining yourself, you can say my poem is a good fit for this magazine because, and then, make sure it is a good fit for the magazine and that you can explain that well. And that might get you a foot in the door. Okay. If you want to take it further and you're looking for an agent, you really want to go big and not just submit to, a small press, but, bigger, like Penguin or Random House. Those are really far away for a lot of people, but maybe that's a goal you have. I have linked here how to write a book proposal and how to write an agent query letter. Okay. It's how people find agents, and it's how people get some books published. Okay. So if you're interested in these resources, I have links here to help you. Okay. There's other ways to publish that don't involve a press or a journal. You can do it yourself. You can make your own press, right? And do your own thing. So here, Poets and Writers has this cool website where they have a little tutorial on how to make your own little book. Here is a Coptic binding slideshow that helps you learn how to bind your own books. And here is a fun YouTube video that teaches you how to construct your own chapbooks. I didn't go into this, but a chapbook essentially is a short collection of poetry, or at least traditionally, it is a short collection of poetry. It has expanded to include comics now, which is really cool. If you ever go to Berkeley and you go downtown and you go into a small independent bookshop, you're going to find a lot of comic chapbooks that independent writers from their community have. They've drawn them, or they've written some poetry. They've built their own chapbooks. They put them together on their own, got the paper, the printing materials. They bound it themselves with wire or string or whatever, or some staples. They went into that bookstore and they said, hey, I'm trying to get my work out there. Let's make a deal. I'll put my chapbooks here, and if they sell, maybe you get half and I get the other half. They're very cheap, usually maybe $5, but you're not really doing it to make money. You're kind of trying to just get your voice out there. Anyway, so it's a way to expose your work, or maybe do make a little bit of money off your work. But you do have to obviously ask the bookstore, because they're going to be the ones putting it out there for you to sell. So here you would go here and learn how to sew your own book together. This is a chapbooks are more of a poet's resource, but again, comics have picked it up, and people have broadened what can go into a chapbook. But traditionally, there's something poets do. It's a long tradition. What's cool about Walt Whitman, a lot of you may have heard of Walt Whitman. Leaves of Grass is one of his most famous books, which is his very first book. He pretty much self-published it, and he wrote it himself, obviously, but then he made the books for them too. And he was submitting them to various writers and mailing them to various writers who didn't even know him. And they were like, hey, can you write me, a cool message saying that you liked it? So that worked out. But a lot of poets will, make their own little chapbooks and stuff because it's hard to publish poetry. There's a lot of poetry out there. It's hard to get a book, right? So this is one way to self-promote. There are other ways to promote your work that don't necessarily fit into a chapbook. There's these things called broadsides. All right, a broadside is again another poet thing. What broadside traditionally is essentially just like an announcement page. It's a page that has text and images, kind of like a meme, right? Traditionally, when print was very expensive, but more people could read, they would, there would be a town square and someone would print this gigantic poster. And on that poster would be all sorts of stuff. There would be ads, there would be news, there would be announcements, there'd be all sorts of stuff, right? And they would put one big poster out in the Times Square and people come and they would read it, okay, together and maybe argue. Right, but they're all reading the same magazine, or they're all reading the same page. And so here is a example of an ad, right, and an announcement. Here is another broadside, heart-rending execution of Fanny Amlett. So it's news. Okay, this in the middle is a traditional broadside, is a broadside that we would do now, right? Back then, this was for news, but small presses, the ways these were made, people would put the letters. Each one is a different letter, and then they would put this huge machine and squish ink on it, and then roll it, and then pull it out, and then you would have that. Well, we don't have those old traditional printing presses now. We have fancier methods, right? But those machines still exist. Those presses still exist. And poets took over and they adopted them. And now broadsides are generally meaning poetry with an image. Okay, so it's a poster of a poem with an image that goes with it. And so this is a broadside by Claudia Rankine. Okay, and then here is a cool image that goes next to it, and then here is a description of the poet, and there's their prose poems. Here, San Francisco Center for the Book is really cool. If you ever end up in San Francisco, you should definitely check out the Center for the Book. They have a couple of presses in there. It's kind of expensive, but they have classes. You can make your own art or broadsides. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Broadsided Press is an online magazine that publishes poetry and what do you call it, with images. So it would be broadsides. They don't print them. You'd have to print them yourself, but they're pretty cool, right? So you could submit your work to them, and if you submit your work to them, they'll pair you up with an artist, or maybe you're an artist and they pair you up with a poet. For example, this one, somebody submitted a poem, right? And then they paired them with an artist and they came up with this poster. And then anyone can go and print them and you can go post them in the town square or on campus. There you go. So that's another way to get people to read your work. It's a form of self-publishing. Then there is the form you're all aware of, which is the Amazon self-publishing, where people can get your work online. I'm going to admit that I do not know much about this, okay? I've never done it myself. I don't know anybody who has published a book online by themselves like this. I know people who are in the midst of doing it, but who have not done it, okay? That you're going to have to research on your own. But I did include this video and this link made by Amazon on how to do it for yourself. I cannot speak to the legitimacy of it in the sense that it used to be called vanity publishing, right? If you want to be a serious poet, most serious poets do not publish their own work like this, Okay. If you want other people to read your poetry, you probably should go through small presses. Okay. Fiction, same thing. I don't know anyone who has published online, but some people have been very famous. Some famous people have done it. They have already got the clout. They don't need their publishing company anymore. They can do it themselves, and anyone would read it. At the same time, some people have published books that became popular because they were published online. One science fiction book I know of called Wool did that, and they published online, and they ended up getting picked up by a publishing house. But again, it's kind of at your own risk. If you want to do that, that's fine. But know that if you publish it online, it is considered publishing, which means you can't publish it through a small press. So if you change your mind and go, I published it myself, it's not really going anywhere, I want to try to submit it to a small press, maybe they'll publish it. They won't publish it because it's already been published. Okay. Small press distribution is a really cool website. It's essentially a website that has nothing but small presses that have published poetry and fiction and all of that stuff. This is where they sell it. Okay, so you can get all sorts of stuff that small presses have published, and you can buy them on this website. They're really, really cool. I believe they come out of San Francisco as well. So that is a very good website. All right. There's other ways to learn more and to, publish and to be part of the community of writers. It doesn't necessarily just have to be in a college classroom, right? There are writers retreats. That is a thing where, you can get grants or scholarships to go and work with other writers and, workshop each other's work, and you get to, usually be in a nice, beautiful, idyllic place. It's almost like a vacation. They feed you so that you can write your book. The Writing Salon, they're really good. They're out of the Bay Area. They're a little pricey, but they have classes and they hire really good people. MFA programs. So say you really like this creative writing stuff and you want to do it more seriously, you can get your master's in it. Which is what I did. I have an MFA in poetry. I went to San Francisco State for my MFA program. I got my bachelor's in creative writing from UCSC, right? So undergrad, San Francisco State also has an undergrad program. Not all undergrad programs have a major in creative writing. So if that's important to you, if that's something you would like to transfer into, make sure that the college you're going to actually has a creative writing major, right? San Jose State does, right? Not all state colleges have MFA programs. Not all universities have MFA programs. Mostly, I believe, actually, state colleges mostly have them. Like UCSC does not have an MFA program. Here's some more classes. This is all online. So the Writing Salon right now is online, but they do have an actual base, right? You can go and go to an actual place in Berkeley and San Francisco and actually meet people face to face. Right now, they're doing it all on Zoom. Gotham writing classes, they're all online. Okay. The Loft Literary Center is also online. These are more classes that you could take, right? Or sign up for workshops and things like that. And then there's the California Arts Council that has lots of resources on how to, get classes, retreats, courses, things like that. So ways to, enhance your experience as a writer.